Happening now, a new search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is underway nearly a dozen years after the Boeing 777
MH370 vanished without a trace, leaving the world shocked and searching for answers for over a decade. Now, new information has leaked about the plane's final location, and authorities are reportedly in panic mode. Could this leak finally solve one of history's biggest mysteries? Or will it only raise more questions about what really happened in the sky that day? Stay with us to find out. The plane that vanished into thin air. It all started like any other normal flight. A big passenger plane rolled down the runway and rose smoothly into the night sky. Inside were people with simple plans and big dreams. Some were excited about holidays, some were returning home, and others were starting new chapters in their lives. The mood was calm, the crew was skilled, the route was familiar, and nothing suggested danger. To everyone watching, it was just another safe journey beginning. After takeoff, the plane stayed in touch with air traffic control. The messages were clear and routine. Everything sounded fine. Then, suddenly the communication stopped. There was no warning and no sign of trouble. At first, officials believed it was a small issue that would fix itself. Planes lose contact sometimes, and it usually means nothing serious. But this time, the silence did not end. As minutes passed, worry began to spread. Radar systems showed something strange. The plane was no longer flying in the direction it was supposed to go. Instead, it appeared to turn back and move across land before heading out toward the wide ocean. Soon after that, it disappeared from radar screens completely. It was as if it had slipped out of the world. Families soon felt the fear before they heard the facts. Loved ones waited at airports, checking clocks, staring at arrival boards, and calling phones that never rang. Officials struggled to give answers because they barely had any. Search teams were rushed into action. Planes flew overhead, ships cut through the sea, and satellites scanned from space. Every possible place was checked, and every small sign was treated as a breakthrough. The search grew bigger with each passing day. Countries worked together, sharing tools and information. The ocean, however, was massive and unforgiving. Each new lead raised hope, only for it to be crushed moments later. As time went on, investigators shared details that deepened the mystery instead of solving it. They revealed that important communication systems on the plane were turned off one by one. This was not something that usually happens by accident. It suggested that someone may have been actively involved after the plane vanished from contact. This single detail changed how the world saw the case. People began to ask harder questions. Was this a planned act, or something that went wrong in a terrible way? Experts argued endlessly. Some blamed technical failure, others suspected hijacking, and some pointed fingers closer to the cockpit. Every theory brought debate, but none brought peace. Weeks turned into months. Eventually, officials admitted they did not know where the plane was. The search area was expanded across huge stretches of deep ocean. Later, small pieces of debris washed up on distant shores. These fragments appeared to come from the missing aircraft. This strongly suggested that the plane had crashed into the sea and broken apart. For families, the news was heartbreaking. They were asked to accept loss without seeing the truth with their own eyes. Years passed, but the pain and questions remained. People could not understand how such a modern aircraft could vanish without a clear trail. Families demanded answers and accused authorities of hiding information. Trust slowly faded as investigations stalled and searches were reduced. Still, the story refused to die. Independent researchers continued studying old data and uncovering patterns others had missed. Every few years, a new claim would appear, promising a solution, but none fully held up. Hope rose and fell again and again. Now, after a long period of quiet, everything feels different. A reported leak has surfaced, pointing to a possible final resting place that was never openly shared. This new information is causing tension and urgency behind the scenes. If it is true, it could explain years of silence and hesitation. And it raises one powerful question that leads straight into what comes next. Why would this location cause panic if there was nothing left to hide? The final signal that changed everything. As the mystery deepened, attention slowly shifted to one haunting detail that refused to be ignored. Long after the plane stopped speaking, faint electronic traces suggested it was still moving. These signals were not messages or voices. just quiet digital handshakes between the aircraft and a satellite high above the Earth. They were weak, indirect, and never meant to be used for tracking, yet they became the only breadcrumbs left behind. Experts studying the data noticed a pattern. The signal showed the plane continued flying for hours after it vanished from radar. This meant one thing clearly: the aircraft did not crash right away. It stayed in the air, steady and controlled, long after anyone realized it was missing. For families and investigators, this discovery was both hopeful and terrifying. Hopeful because it meant the plane had not instantly fallen apart. Terrifying because it raised more questions than answers. By carefully studying the timing of these satellite contacts, specialists drew a rough path the plane might have taken. It pointed south, far away from busy air routes, deep into empty ocean, where few eyes could see and few machines could follow. This area was vast, silent, and extremely deep. If the plane went down there, finding it would be like searching for a needle in a dark, endless sea. Authorities quietly focused their search on this region. Publicly, updates were cautious and limited. Privately, pressure was building. Each new scan of the ocean floor cost time, money, and emotional strength. Still, ships and underwater equipment were sent out, mapping the seabed inch by inch. The world waited, hoping for a discovery that never came. As months dragged on, cracks began to show. Some experts questioned the accuracy of the data. Others argued it was the strongest clue available. Families watched these debates unfold, feeling stuck between belief and doubt. To them, every delay felt like another door closing. Then, without warning, the search slowed and eventually stopped. Officials explained that they had reached the limits of what was possible. The area was too large, the terrain too harsh, and the chances of success too small. For many families, this decision felt like abandonment. They believed the truth was still out there, resting quietly beneath the waves. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Some claimed there were areas never fully searched. Others hinted that certain findings were too sensitive to share openly. Trust continued to erode as silence replaced updates. Now, years later, this same satellite data has returned to the spotlight. A fresh analysis, combined with information from an unexpected source, is pointing to a more exact location. This time, the claim is sharper, more specific, and far harder to ignore. And if this new path is correct, it could explain why the search ended when it did, and why renewed attention is making powerful people uneasy as the story moves forward. Why the search ended so suddenly. After the official search was paused, the world slowly moved on, but the families did not. For them, time did not heal anything. Each morning still began with questions, and each night ended with the same ache. They followed every update closely, no matter how small. When governments stepped back, saying they had done all they could, many families felt left behind, as if their loved ones had been quietly erased from the story. Behind the scenes, however, the mystery was far from over. Private teams, independent experts, and ocean researchers continued working quietly. Some used their own money, others relied on donations. They studied satellite data again, replayed flight simulations, and compared ocean currents with debris findings. Slowly, they began noticing gaps in the official explanations. Certain areas that seemed important were barely explored. Some search paths ended too neatly, as if someone had drawn a line and decided not to cross it. When pieces of the aircraft began washing ashore in different countries, emotions flared again. These fragments were small, damaged, and scattered far apart. Still, each one carried heavy meaning. They proved the plane had broken apart in the ocean, but they also raised new questions. The locations where these pieces were found did not fully match the areas that were searched most carefully. To many observers, it felt like the clues were pointing somewhere else entirely. Ocean scientists explain that water moves in complex ways. Currents can carry objects thousands of miles over long periods. But even with this knowledge, some debris paths seemed strange. When independent analysts traced these movements backward, the results pointed to zones that had received little attention. These zones were deeper, more remote, and far harder to explore. They were also much closer to areas some experts believe the plane may have flown toward in its final hours. As years passed, official statements grew quieter, funding dried up, media attention faded. Still, private researchers kept pushing. New technology allowed them to study the ocean floor in greater detail, using old data in smarter ways. Fresh computer models were built, combining satellite signals, fuel estimates, aircraft behavior, and weather patterns. These models did not scream answers, but they whispered directions. Then something changed. Reports began circulating that a new set of coordinates had surfaced, shared quietly among a small group of insiders. These coordinates were said to come from a mix of refined satellite analysis and information that had never been released publicly. At first, many dismissed it as another false hope. Over the years, there had been plenty of those, but this time felt different. The reactions were different. Instead of calm denials, there was silence. Instead of clear statements, there were vague responses and careful wording. Officials did not rush to correct the claims. They also did not confirm them. That quiet hesitation spoke loudly to those paying close attention. Sources close to the situation suggested that the new location overlapped with an area previously labeled too difficult or unlikely to search, an area where the ocean floor drops sharply and conditions are harsh. Exploring such a place would be expensive, risky, and technically challenging. It would also raise uncomfortable questions about why it was avoided before. The idea that the plane might have been resting there all along was deeply unsettling. It suggested that the truth may not have been out of reach, just out of focus. For families, this possibility reopened wounds that never truly closed. For authorities, it threatened credibility, trust, and past decisions. As whispers spread, pressure quietly built. Some officials reportedly worried that reopening the search would expose mistakes or overlooked evidence. Others feared the emotional impact of confirming a location after so many years of uncertainty. The longer the delay, the heavier the responsibility became. Meanwhile, public interest began to rise again. Online communities picked up the story. Old documents were shared, maps were redrawn, and timelines were re-examined. People started asking why this information was surfacing now and who had allowed it to leak. The idea that something important had been kept from the public only fueled suspicion. The families watched all of this unfold with mixed emotions. Hope returned, but it was cautious and painful. They had learned not to trust easily. Still, the thought that answers might finally be within reach was impossible to ignore. They wanted the truth even if it hurt, because not knowing had already hurt for too long. As attention slowly turned back to the mystery, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about a missing plane. It was about accountability, transparency, and whether the full story had ever been told. The reported location was not just a point on a map. It was a test of honesty and courage. And as the details of this alleged leak continue to surface, the tension grows stronger. Because if the plane really lies where these new findings suggest, then the next step will force decisions no one can avoid. Decisions that could finally uncover the truth or confirm fears that some answers were delayed on purpose. The leak authorities never wanted public. As news of the reported location began to spread quietly, the mood behind closed doors started to change. What once felt like a cold, distant case suddenly became urgent again. Meetings were said to take place in hushed tones. Words were chosen carefully. No one wanted to speak too freely. The calm confidence officials once showed was replaced with visible caution. To many watching closely, it felt like fear was slipping through the cracks. The reason was simple. This new location did not just suggest where the plane might be. It hinted at how much had been known and when. If the aircraft truly rested in this newly discussed area, it would mean the clues were always there, just not fully followed. That idea alone was enough to make people nervous. It raised questions that could not be brushed aside easily. Some insiders began to suggest that the panic was not about finding the wreckage, but about what would happen afterward. Recovering the plane would mean recovering evidence. Evidence does not forget. It does not soften over time. It tells its story clearly, whether people are ready to hear it or not. For anyone who may have made wrong calls years ago, that possibility was deeply unsettling. There was also the matter of trust. Over the years, families were told that everything possible had been done, that all reasonable paths were explored, that the search had reached its limits. If a new discovery now proved otherwise, it would feel like a betrayal, not just to the families, but to the public who believed the official story. Rebuilding that trust would not be easy. At the same time, experts warned that confirming the location would not be simple. The ocean in this region is deep, dark, and unforgiving. Strong currents, uneven terrain, and crushing pressure make exploration extremely difficult. Sending equipment down there would require advanced machines and careful planning. It would take time, money, and global cooperation. Still, many argued that difficulty was no longer a valid excuse. Behind the scenes, debates grew more intense. Some voices pushed for immediate action, saying the world deserved answers. Others urged caution, warning against rushing into another expensive effort without absolute certainty. These disagreements reportedly slowed progress even further. Each delay added to the tension and suspicion. Meanwhile, families of those on board found themselves pulled back into the emotional storm. Phone calls started coming again. Journalists asked questions they had not heard in years. Old wounds reopened. For some, the pain felt fresh all over again. Yet beneath the sorrow, there was also a quiet strength. Many families made it clear that they were ready for the truth no matter what it revealed. Public curiosity continued to grow. People who had once stopped paying attention began to look back into the case. They read timelines, studied maps, and watched old interviews with new eyes. Small details that once seemed unimportant now felt heavy with meaning. The silence from officials only made the curiosity stronger. As pressure mounted, authorities faced an uncomfortable choice. They could ignore the noise and hope it faded away, or they could step forward and address it directly. Either path carried risk. Staying silent would deepen suspicion. Speaking up could open doors they had worked hard to keep closed. What made the situation even more tense was the timing. Technology had improved greatly since the early searches. Tools that once seemed impossible were now available. This meant that if a new search were approved, the chances of success would be higher than ever before. And with success would come answers. Those answers could change everything. They could confirm theories long dismissed. They could clear names or raise serious concerns. They could finally explain why the plane turned, why communication stopped, and what truly happened in its final moments. This potential power made the alleged location feel dangerous, not just important. As days passed, the leak refused to disappear. It moved from quiet discussions into louder conversations. More people began to believe that something real was happening. The idea that the truth might finally surface created a mix of hope and dread. Hope for closure, dread for consequences. Now the story stands at a turning point. The reported location has placed everyone involved under a bright light. Decisions made next will define how this mystery is remembered. Will it become a story of courage and honesty, or one of hesitation and regret? As the world waits, one question hangs heavily in the air. If the final resting place of the plane is truly known, how long can it remain hidden before the truth forces its way to the surface? What the new location claims reveal. As the pressure continued to rise, attention slowly turned to the evidence itself and what it could finally reveal if the wreckage were found. For years, the story had been built on guesses, models, and distant signals. But a real discovery would change everything. It would move the mystery from theory to fact, from endless debate to solid truth. That possibility is what made this moment feel so heavy. If the aircraft is truly resting where the leak suggests, the condition of the wreckage could answer questions that have haunted the world for over a decade. Investigators would be able to see how the plane entered the water, whether it broke apart before impact or after, and if there were signs of struggle inside the cockpit. Even small details, like the angle of debris or the placement of parts, could speak louder than years of public statements. Flight data recorders, often called black boxes, would be the most powerful pieces of all. Though damaged by time and pressure, they might still hold fragments of information. Engine sounds, cockpit noise, system alerts, and final movements could still be stored inside. Even partial data would be enough to confirm or destroy long-held theories. This is why the idea of recovery carries so much weight. Experts say that finding the wreckage would also settle the question of control. It could show whether the plane was guided deliberately, left on autopilot, or affected by sudden failure. The difference matters deeply. One version points to human choice. Another points to tragic malfunction. Without the wreckage, these ideas remain shadows. With it, they become facts. For the families, this stage of the story is the most painful and the most hopeful. Many have lived in emotional suspension, unable to fully grieve or fully move on. A confirmed location would finally anchor their loss in reality. It would allow them to stop imagining endless possibilities and face one truth, however hard it might be. Closure does not erase pain, but it gives pain a place to rest. At the same time, the emotional cost of reopening the case is high. Some families fear being disappointed again. They remember past announcements that promised answers and delivered silence. Trust has been worn thin by time. Still, many say they would rather face the truth than continue living in uncertainty. Silence, they say, has been the cruelest part. On a wider scale, the discovery would force a serious review of how aviation emergencies are handled. It would raise questions about tracking technology, communication systems, and international cooperation. How could a modern aircraft disappear in an age of constant monitoring? Why were certain systems easy to disable? What changes are needed to ensure this never happens again? These are questions that go far beyond one flight. Governments and aviation bodies know this. They understand that the outcome of this case could shape future rules and expectations. It could lead to new safety laws, new tracking requirements, and new standards for transparency. While these changes could save lives, they could also expose past weaknesses. That balance between progress and accountability adds another layer of tension. There is also the matter of responsibility. If mistakes were made, whether through poor decisions, delayed action, or limited communication, they may come to light. This does not mean blame must fall on one person or group, but it does mean the full chain of events would be examined closely. For institutions built on authority and trust, such scrutiny can feel threatening. As discussions continue, the public remains divided. Some believe the leak is the breakthrough everyone has been waiting for. Others worry it is another false trail that will lead to disappointment. Both sides share one thing in common: they want clarity. After so many years, confusion feels unacceptable. Social interest has grown steadily, not in loud bursts, but in focused attention. People are listening more carefully now. They are reading between the lines of official statements. They are noticing pauses, word choices, and what is not being said. In a case shaped by silence, absence often speaks the loudest. Meanwhile, the ocean remains unchanged. Deep below the surface, whatever truth exists has been waiting patiently. Time does not hide it. Pressure does not erase it. The sea keeps secrets, but it also preserves them. This quiet certainty adds to the urgency. The answers are not disappearing. They are simply waiting to be claimed. As the story moves closer to a possible resolution, the emotional weight grows heavier. This is no longer just about finding metal in machines. It is about honoring lives, respecting grief, and facing reality with courage. It is about choosing truth over comfort, even when the truth may be hard to accept. Now, all eyes are fixed on what happens next. Will the reported location lead to action, or will it fade into another unanswered claim? Will those with power choose openness, or will silence return once more? The next decision will shape what will happen next. Because if the wreckage is found, the mystery will finally speak for itself. And when it does, the world will have to listen, ready or not. Why officials are said to be panicking. As the possibility of real action draws closer, a quiet shift can be felt in how the story is being handled. This time, the tone is different. There is less confidence in firm answers and more care in every public move. It feels as though everyone involved understands that this chapter cannot be managed the same way as before. Too much has already been said, and too much time has passed. One of the biggest changes is how information is flowing. In the early years, updates were frequent but shallow. Now, updates are rare, but every word is weighed carefully. This has led many to believe that discussions are happening behind closed doors, where the real decisions are being shaped. Silence in this moment does not feel empty. It feels loaded. A major concern appears to be control of the narrative. If a new search begins, the story will no longer belong only to officials and experts. The moment a discovery is made, images, data, and reactions will spread instantly across the world. There will be no slow rollout of information, no time to prepare the public. The truth, whatever it is, will arrive all at once. That reality alone makes this step frightening for those in charge. There is also the question of expectations. After so many years, people are no longer satisfied with partial explanations. Finding the wreckage without clear answers would not be enough. The public would want to know who made which decisions, why certain paths were taken, and why others were not. Every past statement would be compared against new evidence. Any gap or contradiction would stand out sharply. Experts have pointed out that even a successful recovery would not end all debates. Evidence can answer many questions, but interpretation will still matter. Different specialists may read the same signs in different ways. Still, having real physical proof would narrow the space for speculation. It would ground the conversation in reality rather than imagination. For the families, this stage is emotionally exhausting. Hope has returned, but it is cautious and heavy. They have learned to protect themselves from disappointment. Many say they are preparing for all possible outcomes, including the chance that the wreckage may never be found, even if the location is correct. The ocean does not guarantee cooperation, no matter how strong the clues may be. Yet despite this fear, many families continue to speak up. They push for transparency, not revenge. Their goal has never been to accuse, but to understand. They want the final moments of their loved ones to be known, not buried under silence. This steady pressure keeps the case alive even when official energy fades. Another factor adding weight to the moment is public memory. The disappearance of this flight became a symbol of uncertainty in a world that believed it had everything mapped and tracked. Revisiting the case now forces society to face its limits. It reminds people that technology is powerful but not perfect, that human systems, no matter how advanced, can still fail. This realization has sparked renewed conversations about safety and responsibility. Aviation experts are once again discussing how planes are tracked, how emergencies are handled, and how information is shared across borders. These discussions are no longer theoretical. They feel personal, shaped by the possibility that answers may finally arrive. As attention grows, so does the risk of misinformation. Old rumors resurface. New theories appear, some thoughtful, others reckless. This makes clear communication more important than ever. If officials choose to speak, they will need to do so with honesty and clarity. Any attempt to soften or redirect the truth would likely backfire. At the same time, there is a sense that this moment may not last forever. Public focus can shift quickly. If no clear action follows the leak, interest could fade again. Those watching closely know this window is narrow. Decisions made now will determine whether this case moves forward or slips back into silence. What stands out most is how fragile trust has become. It can be rebuilt, but only through openness and courage. Acknowledging uncertainty may feel risky, but pretending certainty where none exists would be worse. The world no longer expects perfection, it expects honesty. As the story approaches what could be its final stretch, the weight of responsibility grows heavier. This is about more than solving a mystery. It is about showing respect for lives lost and lessons learned. It is about proving that truth still matters, even when it is inconvenient. Soon, a choice will have to be made, to act or to wait, to reveal or to remain silent. And whatever choice is made will speak louder than any statement ever could. However, this story is not just asking where the plane went. It is asking who we are when faced with the chance to finally know. So, what do you think about the reported MH370 location leak? Was it a breakthrough long overdue, or a secret some wanted hidden? Let this story remind us that even the deepest mysteries can hold truths waiting to surface. Share your thoughts below, and keep the search for answers alive.